You dragged a relic to a war council? The alien strategist barked, barely suppressing his laughter as the frail, coughing human was wheeled in. Others chuckled openly. One even offered the old man a glucose stick as if handing charity to a museum prop. The soldier didn't flinch. He wiped his mouth with the back of a trembling hand, looked around the vast chamber of alien elite, and whispered, "Green light." At first, no one reacted. But then, two aides standing near the communication hub dropped their datapads. One bolted for the hallway without a word. The other just froze, eyes wide, color draining. The laughter died faster than an airlock breach. The room was vast and imperial. Black steel walls lined with pulsating star charts and fleet movement holograms. In the center stood the Council of Advisors, the highest echelon of the Drauvar Empire. They had conquered 7 galaxies, broken 3 super civilizations, and were now circling Earth like vultures around a last carcass. And yet, when humanity's delegation walked in, they didn't bring generals or even envoys. They brought him. No name. No rank. No salutes. Just a hunched man in a military coat faded by time and blood. His boots scraped the floor like echoes from a forgotten war. The head advisor, Lord Vescari, tilted his sharp reptilian head and spoke with theatrical disdain. "Your species is either clever beyond reason, or mad beyond help. Is this your final offering? This fading creature?" He drew laughs from the room again. But the human sitting in the chair merely looked up with milky eyes and took a slow breath. No defense. No explanation. Just that one word again, quieter now, like a lit match in a quiet room. Green light. No one understood what he meant. Not yet. But somewhere beyond the citadel walls, systems began to shift. Silent signals pulsed through encrypted human networks buried deep within Earth's forgotten infrastructure. Satellites blinked to life, ones even the Drauvar didn't know existed. And in a remote station orbiting Jupiter's black moon, a technician who had waited 15 years for a codeword stood and began typing. Back in the chamber, Earth's delegation remained eerily silent. No rebuttal. No argument. No performance. Just that one man. The advisors grew uncomfortable with how little response they got. They preferred resistance. This silence, this unnerving confidence, gnawed at them. It wasn't how weaklings behaved. Weaklings begged. This man was waiting. Vescari rose and paced around the human like a predator appraising wounded prey. "You didn't even bring a translator. Can he speak?" One of the alien ministers laughed. "He's too old to stand, let alone strategize. Perhaps he thinks this is a retirement ceremony." The joke circled again. The soldier blinked, almost nodding as if humoring them, then reached into his coat pocket. A low whine came from a worn, hand-sized device. He didn't look at it, just held it up like someone showing a badge no one expected. One of the guards closest to the device backed away. Another tried to scan it, but their reader shorted out. A puff of smoke. Then a warning flickered across several alien data stations simultaneously. Red glyphs. Power grid interference. Data redundancy anomalies. Command access breach flagged. Someone, somewhere, was inside the network. Deep. Vescari's tail twitched. He stepped back. "Is this a trick?" he snapped. "An old man's bluff?" But others were starting to piece things together. One advisor, young and smug, tapped into the galactic archive to search the soldier's identity. Nothing. No military records. No diplomatic credentials. Not even a public birth trace. Just a ghost file tagged with the most encrypted clearance tier, Omega Black, sealed before Earth's AI collapse. A whisper slid through the chamber. Not spoken. Transmitted? From console to console. One word, ghost light. Vescari's expression darkened. "This name, it doesn't exist." A senior tactician stood. "That's the point. The ghost light protocol was a myth. A deterrent theory. It couldn't be real." But others weren't so sure. Even the chamber's automated security began to hesitate. Lighting shifted. Surveillance drones retreated. Without input. The human soldier coughed again, more out of habit than weakness, and glanced toward the star map projected over the council table. It depicted the Drauver's projected occupation of Earth, fortress cities already pre-marked, population centers divided, resistance paths calculated. He gave it a long look, then finally spoke. "You drew the map too early." It wasn't said with anger or threat. Just truth. Cold and clean. The kind that doesn't argue. One of the alien advisors sneered. "You can't stop us. You don't even have ships left." The soldier looked him straight in the eye and replied, "We don't need ships. We built ladders underneath your walls." Confusion broke out. What did that mean? Across the chamber, a communication officer's console began to flicker with alerts. Drauver outposts along the far rim were going dark. No contact. Simultaneously. Then came visual footage, scrambled, grainy, but clear enough to show Earth-born operatives surfacing in sealed bunkers once thought abandoned. No uniforms. Just symbols. A circle of 13 lines around the letters GL. The insignia of Green Light Command. One advisor backed into a wall. "They're not launching a war. They already launched it. Years ago." The soldier leaned forward, using his cane more for show than support, and added, "And now it's too late to negotiate terms." The chamber lost all sense of formality. Panic whispers grew. Tactical units were called. Data centers locked. But the damage had long been done. For years, Earth hadn't resisted Drauver conquest. They had predicted it. Modeled it. Invited it. And while the advisors planned victory, Green Light had turned their infrastructure into a weapon. Finally, Vescari growled through clenched fangs. "What is your name?" The soldier gave him a long look. Not pity. Not pride. Just inevitability. "I was erased so this could live." He turned off the device in his hand. Instantly, a transmission sent from the moon base to every hidden satellite in the solar system began playing a sequence. 5 tones and a code that triggered dozens of automated actions across space. It wasn't war. It was ignition. As alarms began to blare across the Drauver Empire, the old soldier sat back down slowly, pulled a small flask from his coat, and took a sip. "You really should have listened the first time," he muttered. "Green light means go." The silence inside the citadel of strategy lingered like smoke after a fire. The once loud chamber had turned into a room of unreadable expressions, buzzing alerts, and sidelong glances. No one knew what to say, or rather, they were all terrified to speak first. Lord Vescari hadn't moved since the transmission ended. He stood rigid, eyes locked on the old soldier who now looked far less like a dying man and far more like something built for waiting out centuries. One of the younger advisors finally broke the silence, speaking in a tone that tried too hard to sound firm. He said the words carefully, as if afraid they might be recorded, which they likely were. "We need full background on this human now. He isn't in our database. That's a breach. Get internal archives on it." A team of data analysts and archivists were dispatched immediately. They dove into Earth's shared systems, surveillance recordings, alliance files, even black market identification logs. Nothing. It was as if the man had walked out of a sealed tomb. No fingerprints. No genome chain. No digital ghost. Just fragments, shredded into silence. Then someone pulled up a degraded archive stub labeled Directive Omega, Ghost Command. It had no context. No detail. But it was there. Sealed under protocols older than the Drauver Earth Contact Agreement itself. One analyst bypassed the firewall manually. It lasted 3 seconds. Then the system bricked. Not just the screen. The entire console overheated, split along the seams, and sparked. Smoke filled the analysis bay. The analyst stood stunned, the smell of melted plastic on his gloves. In another corner of the citadel, a retired Drauver general named V.S. Talon had been summoned reluctantly. He was ancient by their standards, one of the few who remembered the siege of Delvic Prime, a war Earth was never officially part of. He entered the chamber, leaning heavily on a crystallized cane, and stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the soldier sitting near the war table. His jaw trembled. That man? The advisors turned toward him. You recognize him? Talon nodded slowly. I saw him. Once. A long time ago. He walked through a fire corridor we designed to erase everything biological. No shielding. Just walked through it like the heat didn't touch him. We were told it was a myth after. Something made up by traumatized troops. But it was him. Whispers filled the air again. One advisor, previously smug, now looked pale. But he's too old. That was 70 years ago. Talon didn't blink. Maybe. Or maybe he doesn't age like we do. That was the first time I heard the phrase Ghost Command. A myth, they told me. A tactical ghost story. But now you dragged the myth to the heart of the Empire. And he's real. The panic was spreading beneath the surface. Some still resisted the gravity of what was happening, clinging to rational explanations. Perhaps it was psychological warfare. Perhaps the humans had built a legend to frighten them. But legends didn't break data centers. Legends didn't override security protocols built on quantum encryption. Legends didn't light up dead cities like they were part of a trap years in the making. Reports began trickling in from border colonies. First, the minor outposts stopped reporting. Then the monitoring beacons themselves blinked out. Communications were getting jammed. Not overtly. Not loudly. Just replaced. Subtly, quietly, whole chains of relays had been rerouted, not by explosions, not by sabotage, but by pre-existing subroutines now waking up. Routines the Drauver never found because they never suspected Earth capable of that level of infiltration. And who would have? Earth barely survived their own wars a century ago. They were always playing catch-up. Or so it seemed. In a secure war room 1 floor below, Vescari and his top aides gathered. Their expressions were carved from tension. The screen before them showed a wide stellar map of occupied space. Over a dozen systems had flickered yellow, meaning interrupted access. 6 had gone red, meaning complete loss of data flow. One of the aides pointed at a red sector and said, "That's a silent colony. There's no war there. We don't even patrol it." Another added, "But it has deep-range missile platforms. If those go dark." They stared at the map as new symbols began appearing. Circles of 13 white lines. Not Drauver. Not Earth Standard. Just there. Placed on locations where previous conflicts had occurred. Or where Earth had retreated years ago. Someone was marking them. Claiming them. Another aide said the words none of them wanted to hear. This isn't the start of an invasion. It's a signal. A recall. Back in the chamber above, the soldier sat alone now. Even the guards gave him distance. He seemed half asleep, head bowed, fingers resting over the smooth surface of the device he'd shown earlier. A communications officer stepped in cautiously and asked if he needed anything. The soldier looked up slowly and replied, "I need you to stop trying to find me in your database. You'll never understand who I was. Only what I activated." The officer didn't respond. Just backed away. That night, the Citadel received an encoded broadcast. Not from Earth. From within their own systems. It was a short phrase repeated over and over in digital tone pulses. Green light command confirmed. Awaiting cascade. It sounded like nonsense until one advisor traced the frequency. It matched a dormant relay buried beneath one of the Empire's oldest supply networks. A relic infrastructure left alone for centuries. They had never considered it vulnerable. Now they couldn't even shut it down. Then the oldest advisor of the Council, who rarely spoke and mostly observed, turned toward Vescari and said, "Do you remember the archive about human psychological tactics? The one about symbolic warfare?" Vescari nodded slowly. "Why?" The advisor gestured toward the screen. "Because I think we misunderstood the phrase green light. It's not an alert. It's not a code. It's a worldview. They were never trying to stop us. They were preparing to erase our certainty." Another alert chimed in. A fleet returning from patrol reported a strange encounter. A derelict Earth vessel floating dead in space had suddenly powered up and transmitted only one thing: a name. The same name from the Citadel. The soldier's code name. No weapons. No threats. Just his voice, echoing from what should have been an empty ship. Green light confirmed. Proceed. And then that ship jumped coordinates without a drive signature, disappearing from every scanner within milliseconds. Vescari stood slowly from his seat in the war room and whispered to no one in particular, "We didn't bring a prisoner into this room. We brought in the architect. And he just unlocked the second phase." The following morning, the Citadel awoke to an atmosphere of unease thick enough to choke the corridors. What should have been another day of triumphant negotiations with the crippled human delegation was now shrouded in whispers, locked doors, and emergency meetings. The star maps, once full of confident trajectory projections and resource annex plans, now pulsed with unfamiliar glyphs. Territories that had long been tagged as secure suddenly flickered with visual anomalies. Entire quadrants were registering low-frequency emissions that hadn't been active in decades. No one could explain it, but everyone knew where it traced back to: the wordless presence of the soldier still seated quietly in the chamber above. Outside the Citadel, on the distant edges of the Empire's grasp, border surveillance teams were encountering a new kind of silence. Not just technical blackout, but a coordinated, deliberate vacuum. Patrols sent to investigate dormant zones were failing to return. One scout ship launched toward the former Terran evacuation site near the Novar Cliffs never even sent back a ping. But what followed was even stranger. A second team dispatched to recover them reported no wreckage, no debris field. Just a gleaming black crater in the rock, perfectly cut, and pulsing with faint blue lights. No heat signature. No signs of life. Just a symbol engraved into the stone, the same circle of 13 lines. Word of the symbol spread like wildfire through the lower command levels. Some called it the death seal. Others called it the countdown mark. But all of them felt the same chill: these weren't fresh installations. They had been placed long ago. Hidden beneath centuries of natural dust, vegetation, and abandoned buildings. Someone had buried them deep, waiting for the right moment. That moment, it seemed, had arrived. Inside the Citadel's Command Analytics Center, 2 alien strategists stared at a satellite transmission from Earth's moon. It showed a low-orbit human platform that had been assumed offline for the past 20 years. Now it was active, transmitting bursts to locations across several systems. One of the analysts traced the bursts and paled. "They're not messages. They're handshakes. Syncing signals." The second analyst leaned in. "Syncing with what?" The response was slow, as if the answer were clawing its way into the room. "Bunkers. Old Terran bunkers marked destroyed during the last skirmish. Except, they're not destroyed. They're waking up." Footage began pouring in from across various Empire sectors. Surveillance drones caught glimpses of activity in zones long dismissed as uninhabitable. Figures in matte black armor, moving with precision and speed that defied age. They didn't engage. They didn't even acknowledge the drones. They just moved through terrain like ghosts, unbothered and unafraid. When one drone attempted to follow a squad too closely, it was hit by a low-frequency EMP wave that didn't just shut it down, it made the core rewrite its own memory log with gibberish. Engineers trying to recover the logs were met with a looping sequence of sound, 5 tones followed by a whispered phrase. Green light confirmed. The advisory council was thrown into chaos. Traditional invasion models didn't apply. These weren't armies appearing from hyperspace or battle fleets signaling intent. This was decay from within. Silent. Infiltrative. Reclaiming rather than conquering. Worse, the locations now becoming active weren't arbitrary. They were emotionally symbolic to Earth's history. Mass graves. Craters where famous cities once stood. Disaster zones from human wars. Places the Drauver believed Earth wanted to forget. But now it looked like they had turned those places into vaults. Buried cities rising from the dead, not with civilians, but with warriors. A request was made to deploy a Class 7 Spectral Response Force to investigate these sites. It was denied by the Emperor himself. The reason was terse: we don't know what we're walking into. Even the Empire's most arrogant warlords were hesitating. Rumors swirled that at least 3 colonies had voluntarily disconnected from the Empire's central command ring and gone dark. Not out of rebellion. Out of fear. They believed whatever Earth had reawakened could not be stopped with force. They didn't want to be on any side when it arrived. In the war room beneath the council chambers, Vescari met privately with a group of high-ranking war architects and digital tacticians. On the center table was a 3D render of all zones where green light activity had been detected. The pattern looked random at first glance, scattered, messy. But then someone applied a rotational algorithm based on old Terran cartographic projection. The points aligned into a spiral. Not just any spiral. A Fibonacci sequence. An ancient human signature of perfection in chaos. That's when the room went completely silent. One architect said aloud what they all feared. This isn't retaliation. This is orchestration. Elsewhere, on the Empire's edge, a low-ranking Drauver guard received orders to abandon his watch post and retreat. But he hesitated. His outpost overlooked what had once been a Terran refugee city turned wasteland after a plasma strike. Nothing had lived there in years. But now, he was watching as towers rose from beneath the dust, like machines unfolding themselves from sleep. No engines. No power surge. Just steel rising silently, reconfiguring. He transmitted one image to his superior and said, "I don't think this was a city. I think it was a disguise." Back in the Citadel, the human soldier hadn't moved. Still seated, hands folded, eyes closed. A junior advisor approached nervously and asked if he was awake. The soldier responded without opening his eyes. "Awake enough." The advisor stammered a question. "What is this? Why now?" The soldier opened his eyes and answered simply. "Because this was never about stopping you. This was about timing the fall." The junior advisor backed away without another word. In the hours that followed, more messages began to appear in seemingly random places. On internal terminals, inside private comms, even in the Empire's defense architecture. But they weren't messages from Earth. They were echoes of old Drauver transmissions, cut, spliced, and edited to reveal a hidden sublayer. Someone had been inside their systems for years, collecting data, learning their protocols, repackaging their own history as a weapon. One advisor screamed in frustration. "How long has this been happening?" Another one whispered, "Maybe it never stopped." And in one colony, at the heart of the former occupation zone, a child playing near a broken terraformer found a small device half buried in the sand. When it lit up, it projected a human soldier's face, not young, not old. Just calm. And his words echoed across the playground before the device dissolved in silence. "We never left. We just went dark. And now the light's back on." Somewhere in the outer systems, an emergency broadcast interrupted all local programming. It was brief, scrambled, and initially dismissed as static interference. But when technicians ran it through standard decryption filters, it formed 5 unmistakable notes, followed by a phrase now haunting every military channel across the Empire. "Advise evacuation from coordinates 99-GL, 99-GL. The message repeated twice before cutting out. On the surface, it sounded like a warning, a distress call. But one intelligence officer who had been quietly compiling green light incidents realized something chilling. That wasn't a warning. It was a targeting confirmation. 99-GL wasn't a place. It was a sequence. A firing solution. Within the Citadel, chaos was no longer hiding behind bureaucracy. Advisors who once postured with arrogance now spoke in whispers, glancing over their shoulders. Tactical teams were ordered to isolate sections of the Empire's grid where communication blackouts had emerged. But as they moved, the blackouts moved with them. Faster. As if chasing them. The strange part was that nothing physical had attacked. There were no invaders on the ground, no ships in the air, no weapons discharged. It was information warfare at a scale the Empire had never encountered. Whole fleets were turning in on themselves, unable to distinguish real signals from false ones. Drover vessels were opening fire on their own support crafts. Drones with friendly identifiers were being marked as hostiles. And all of it seemed to stem from one silent command echoing through the systems: green light confirmed. The situation worsened when reports began surfacing from elite warships stationed near the inner ring. These ships were supposed to be unbreachable, protected by a closed-loop system disconnected from external data influence. But even they weren't spared. One cruiser reported that its entire navigation system had been rerouted. Not to an enemy location, but to orbit around a dead moon marked as decommissioned. No one could explain how it happened. The crew tried manual overrides. Nothing responded. The ship was now under the control of a protocol no one understood, and by the time command tried to shut it down, it was too late. The ship self-destructed mid-orbit, taking 2 other vessels with it. Back at the Citadel, Vescari slammed his fist into the war table. Enough. This is sabotage, not strategy. We will deploy spectral fleets to all affected zones. Burn the grounds. Shut down the nodes. Find their origin. His voice echoed through the hall, desperate to grasp a sense of control. But one of the senior advisors stood slowly, holding a tablet shaking in his claws. There is no origin, he said. Not anymore. They are not launching from anywhere. They are launching from everywhere. The soldier still sat in his chair, breathing slowly, as if detached from the storm around him. A pair of guards had been instructed to keep close watch, but they stood 5 paces away, avoiding eye contact. When one of them glanced at the man, he saw that he was smiling faintly, eyes focused on the lights above as though waiting for something. The guard couldn't help himself. "What is this?" he asked. "What do you people want?" The soldier didn't move. "We want you to remember. That's all. Remember how this started. And remember who you laughed at." The guard blinked, confused. The soldier looked at him and added, "We were the story you tried to erase. So we rewrote the ending." An encrypted council-only transmission lit up all senior consoles. It carried the Emperor's seal, but the tone of the voice was almost broken. "You must contain this. Not just for the Empire, but for all civilizations connected to our grid. They have found the Blacklist Protocol." That caught everyone's attention. The Blacklist was a failsafe created eons ago, meant to isolate entire sectors if a civilization became too unstable or dangerous. It was buried in the deepest levels of their systems. No one should have had access to it. But someone did. Someone triggered it. A few minutes later, fleet commanders across the Empire began receiving new deployment instructions. They were to secure all outer colonies with force and initiate immediate shutdowns of all systems that showed unusual behavior. But as they executed the orders, their identification keys were rejected. A message blinked on their control panels, repeating in their native script: "Command not recognized. You are not on the list." Panic turned to dread. One fleet captain attempted to manually reroute his entire ship's system using an emergency protocol chip only issued to high command. The moment he did, his screen froze and displayed a single symbol. 13 white lines in a circle. The lights on his ship dimmed. Engines cut. Comms went silent. The vessel drifted dead into the void. No warning. No violence. Just complete erasure. In colony control stations, governors tried to rally civilians, claiming the Empire had the situation under control. But in the background of every broadcast, static would creep in, and for a few seconds, a face would appear. Not young. Not monstrous. Just a man. A human man. The soldier. Staring into the screen. Calm. And he would say the same words each time before disappearing. Green light confirmed. The ripple effect spread even into the Empire's cultural sectors. Artifacts stolen from Earth began vanishing from museums. Not stolen by thieves. Removed. Cleanly. As if never there. Displays flickered, empty cases stared out like silent accusations. Entire digital archives of Terran languages and history files began corrupting in real time. Not with gibberish. With coordinates. coordinates that formed constellation paths, each one leading to known imperial strongholds. One planetary governor attempted to defy evacuation orders and called in a reinforcement fleet. When they arrived, they found the city gone. Not destroyed. Gone. Flattened. Not a single body. No blood. No remains. Just a perfect ring in the soil and a floating beacon pulsing slowly with white light. The beacon broadcast only one phrase in Terran code. Target acquired. Operation complete. The Citadel locked down entirely. All external channels were severed. Veskari stood before the remaining advisors and barked, "This is not war. This is annihilation by narrative. They made themselves the glitch in our memory. And we let them in." His voice cracked slightly at the end. Someone asked what they should do next. Another whispered, "Do we surrender?" Then the soldier finally stood. No one noticed at first. But when they did, a chill settled through the chamber. He was not shaking. He did not look ill. He stood like someone who had been waiting centuries to stretch their spine again. He looked around the room, not with hatred or mockery, but with pity. "We never wanted your systems. We wanted your certainty. That's always what collapses first." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small chip. He held it between two fingers. "This isn't a weapon," he said. "It's a mirror. You only need to look." Then he dropped it on the floor. The lights flickered. And every screen in the Empire went black. At first, there was silence. A hollow, technological nothingness that swept across the entire Empire like a wave with no sound. No alarms. No explosions. Just absence. Every data screen, every interface, every command hub, gone dark. Not shattered, not sabotaged. Just switched off as if by the hand of something that had always been there, watching from behind the circuitry. Inside the Citadel, the blackout froze the room in a moment of suspended disbelief. The advisors who once shouted orders were now staring into the void of their lifelines, blinking screens now reduced to dull glass. A few reached for manual overrides, emergency protocols, physical backups. None responded. The entire Empire's infrastructure, the web of power they had taken centuries to construct, had been rendered irrelevant in the blink of an eye. The old soldier didn't move at first. He stood there in the dead center of the room, a figure of simple presence against the chaos his silence had caused. The chip he had dropped still sat at his feet, inert, like a key no one knew how to use. One of the remaining guards slowly raised his weapon, not out of courage but instinct. The soldier looked at him and didn't flinch. "If you shoot, you might feel better, but it won't bring your empire back." The guard hesitated, weapon trembling, then slowly lowered it. There was something in the way the man spoke, a weight not of command but inevitability. He wasn't asking them to believe anything. He was just stating what already was. In the outer colonies, citizens looked to the skies and saw nothing. The patrol vessels that once painted the heavens with blue and red trails had vanished. The glowing banners of imperial dominance that once pulsed through their night skies had gone dim. In some places, there was confusion, even joy. Children danced in the open without fear of curfews. In others, the silence brought panic. Isolation bred unrest. People shouted into dead calms, seeking answers, begging for reassurance that never came. In one rural colony, an old man stood alone and whispered to no one, "I knew they'd come back. I just never thought they'd be quiet about it." Inside a secure vault within the Citadel, high-ranking officers initiated the final safeguard known only to the inner circle. Project Reticle. A full purge and rebuild. A scorched earth digital restart. The system failed to launch. Instead of a reset sequence, the vault screens lit with a single transmission. A face. His face. The human soldier. But it was not a live feed. It was a recorded message, timed to activate only if the reticle protocol was ever triggered. His voice filled the vault, calm and without hatred. "If you're seeing this, then you've done what I expected. You tried to burn the system to save it. But what you never realized is, the system was never yours. You built your empire on scaffolding we let you find. We left you just enough light to think you owned the fire. His image flickered, not with degradation, but with intentional distortion. This is not war. This is conclusion. There is no surrender. There is no counterattack. There is only what remains after you're gone. The message ended. Silence returned. In the core of the citadel, Vescari sat hunched over the war table, fingers digging into the edges, knuckles white. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "What do you want from us?" he asked the soldier, not as a threat but a plea. The man stepped forward, his boots echoing softly in the once proud chamber. "We wanted you to know how it felt. To be dismissed. Mocked. Labeled primitive." He stopped a few feet from the table. "You thought power was noise. Guns. Ships. Conquest. You forgot the one thing your technology never taught you. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Sometimes it means patient." One of the advisors to his right finally snapped. "This isn't justice. This is terrorism." The soldier turned to him, face unreadable. "No. Terrorism is fear without purpose. This is memory. This is debt collected." He turned again, addressing all of them. "You thought we were too scattered to fight back. You thought our dead cities meant we had nothing left. But they were never graves. They were seeds." A new alert blinked on across the remaining auxiliary screens, despite the blackout. A planetary feed from the Empire's capital world showed a massive crowd gathering in front of the royal complex. But they weren't rioting. They were standing still, staring at the sky. Dozens of small, dark shapes were descending. Not ships. Beacons. Each one carrying a different message in the local language. Some were poems. Some were lists of names long forgotten. Some were just mirrors. Back in the chamber, the soldier's voice softened. "You asked what we wanted. We wanted you to feel powerless. Not because we broke your walls, but because we made you see how hollow they were. You had all the power in the galaxy. And still, you feared a dying man with no army. That fear is your truth." Then, finally, he turned to leave. No guards stopped him. No weapons were raised. As he walked toward the exit, the chamber lights dimmed once more, not from system failure, but from design. One by one, they shut down behind him, leaving the advisors in growing darkness. Before he crossed the threshold, he paused, not turning, and said, "We won't rebuild your systems. We won't occupy your worlds. We don't need to. You will do it yourselves. With our shadow over your shoulder." He walked out. In the silence that followed, the Empire began to splinter. Not with explosions or invasions, but with realization. Each governor, each commander, each citizen now understood something deep and irreversible. The human soldier hadn't destroyed their empire. He had exposed it. For what it always was. A hollow tower built on arrogance. And now, without their digital gods, they were left to face themselves. Some planets disconnected completely, choosing to rebuild without imperial banners. Others turned on their governors, demanding accountability. But no messages were sent to Earth. No war declarations. No revenge plans. Because deep down, they all understood the same thing. Green light had never meant go. It had meant done. And the man who said it? He had never been dying. He had just been waiting.